The scream tore through the midnight forest like a blade through silk. Amora dropped her bundle of firewood, heart hammering against her ribs. Everyone knew the rules: never enter the forest after dark. Never follow strange sounds. Never question what the elders forbade. But something in that cry wasn't entirely human, yet it carried a pain so raw that her feet moved before her mind could stop them. Branches clawed at her worn dress as she pushed deeper into the darkness. The village called her the Invisible One, too poor to matter, too quiet to notice. No one would miss her if she vanished tonight. The screaming stopped. Silence pressed against her ears like water. Then she saw it, a figure chained to an ancient tree, wrist bound in iron that gleamed despite the darkness. Its head hung low, hair covering its face. But when it sensed her presence, it lifted its gaze. Eyes like molten gold met hers, and Amora felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This was no ordinary prisoner. This was something the forest itself had tried to hide. Her hands trembled as she approached the chains. Every instinct screamed danger, yet compassion overwhelmed fear. The being watched her silently, its breathing shallow and labored. Up close, she noticed its skin seemed to shimmer faintly, like moonlight on water. The chains weren't rusty, they looked freshly forged, deliberate. Who would do this? And why so deep in the forbidden forest? Amora searched for a lock but found none. The metal was seamless, impossible. She pulled anyway, her careless fingers scraping against cold iron. Suddenly, the being spoke, its voice barely a whisper yet somehow filling the entire forest. Amora. Her blood turned to ice. How did it know her name? She'd never seen this creature before in her life. Before she could flee, the chains began to crack. Not from her efforts, but from within, glowing with white light that spread like veins through the metal. They shattered into dust, falling like snow around them. The being slumped forward, free but weakened. The trees around them shivered violently despite the still air. Leaves rained down in thousands. And in the darkness beyond, something moved, watching, waiting, calculating. Moonlight broke through the canopy, and Amora gasped. The being's form seemed to shift and flicker like a candle flame. One moment it appeared human, a man with angular features and sorrowful eyes. The next moment, its outline blurred into something else entirely, something her mind couldn't quite grasp. Wings that weren't quite there. Hands that occasionally showed too many fingers. A presence that felt ancient beyond measure. Terror gripped her throat, but she didn't run. She'd spent her entire life being ignored, invisible to everyone who mattered. Perhaps that's why she could see this creature when others couldn't. Perhaps that's why compassion still lived in her heart despite years of cruelty. "What are you?" she whispered. The being tilted its head, studying her with those impossible golden eyes. Before it could answer, orange light flickered between distant trees. A torch. Voices carried on the wind, hunters, searching. The village patrol must have heard the commotion. If they found her here with this creature, they'd call her a witch. They'd burn her without trial. The being reached out one shimmering hand toward her, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Amora burst into her tiny hut as dawn painted the sky gray. She'd hidden the being under her cloak, praying no one would notice the strange shimmer that followed her home. Her dwelling was barely 4 walls and a roof, the poorest home in the poorest part of the village. Perfect for hiding secrets. No one ever visited her anyway. She gave the being water from her only clay pot and watched in fascination as it drank. Its form had stabilized into something mostly human now, though its eyes still glowed faintly in the shadows. Outside, voices rose in excitement. Amora peeked through a crack in her wall and saw neighbors gathering in the village square. Old Mama Folek waved her arms dramatically, describing lights she'd seen dancing in the forest. Machenton claimed he'd heard screaming that made his blood freeze. Children whispered about ghosts and monsters. The blacksmith's son swore he'd seen footprints that started human but ended as something else entirely. Fear spread like wildfire through the crowd. The elders would certainly investigate now. Amora turned back to her strange guest, and her breath caught. It was staring directly at her broken wall, at the exact spot where her neighbor Kemi often stood to spy. The voice entered her mind like water seeping through cracks. Not spoken aloud, but somehow more real than any sound. They are coming for me, Amora. And they will destroy you to find me. She pressed her hands to her temples, overwhelmed by the invasion of her thoughts. The being's presence filled her consciousness, showing her fragments of images, the village square ablaze, people screaming, children crying. But these weren't futures, they were memories. Things that had already happened, long ago. What are you showing me? She asked aloud. The truth your elders buried. 300 years ago, this village made a choice. They stole mercy from the land to prosper. They chained compassion itself to prevent it from interfering with their greed. The being's form flickered, growing more solid as it spoke. I am what they sacrificed. I am what they feared would make them weak. Amora's mind reeled. Then the being said something that made her blood run cold. Your village elder, Baba Ogun, the man you trust most, was there. He remembers. He is older than he appears. Impossible. Baba Ogun was 70 at most. Unless. The being's golden eyes held her steadily. Some prices buy more than prosperity. They buy time. Torches blazed through the village that night as hunters organized a search party. Amora watched through her door crack as they gathered weapons, machetes, spears, even the old hunting rifles kept for emergencies. The blacksmith's son led them, his face twisted with excitement and fear. They'd found tracks leading from the ancient tree. They knew something had been freed. She'd barely closed her door when footsteps approached. Her heart stopped. They paused right outside her hut, so close she could hear breathing. Search everywhere, a gruff voice commanded. Whatever was in that forest, it couldn't have gone far. Amora looked desperately at the being, but it had already vanished, simply ceased to be visible. She could still feel its presence, like warm air against her skin, but her eyes saw nothing. The footsteps moved away, and she released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Then a voice whispered from the darkness outside, cold and promising violence. We know someone freed it, and we will find them. Whoever helped that abomination will burn with it. This is your only warning, surrender the creature by sunrise, or the whole village suffers. The voice belonged to someone she knew, someone she trusted. But she couldn't quite place who. The being materialized again as the hunter's voices faded. Now it stood at full height, and Amora realized it was magnificent, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. It gestured toward her dirt floor, and images began forming in the dust, moving like living memories. Your ancestors were not always cruel, it explained. Once, this land thrived on balance. People took only what they needed. They honored the forest, the spirits, the cycle of giving and receiving. The images shifted, showing a village celebration, people dancing and laughing. But a plague came. Crops failed. Children starved. In desperation, your elders made a bargain with something old and hungry. Amora saw figures gathered around the fire, chanting words that made her skin crawl just hearing them in memory. They summoned a spirit of pure consumption. It promised prosperity but demanded a price. They must chain away mercy, lock away compassion, and embrace only strength and ambition. The images darkened, showing the being chained to the tree. I tried to stop them. I am the guardian of balance, of kindness, of the invisible threads that hold communities together. So they imprisoned me where no one would find me. The being's eyes met hers. Your family, Amora, they were the ones who refused to participate. And they were punished for it. Kemi appeared at her door the next morning, smiling too widely. Amora's childhood friend carried a basket of bread, unusual, since Kemi's family never shared food with the invisible one. Suspicion crawled up Amora's spine. "I heard you were near the forest last night," Kemi said sweetly, eyes darting around the small hut. "People are talking. I wanted to make sure you were safe." Lies. Every word dripped with false concern. Amora could see the jealousy burning behind Kemi's eyes, jealousy that had festered since they were children. Jealousy that Amora, despite having nothing, somehow maintained hope and kindness. "I'm fine," Amora replied carefully. "Just gathering firewood, as always." Kemi stepped closer, peering into the shadows. "Strange things are happening. Some say a witch has cursed us. Some say a demon walks among us." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I know you have secrets, Amora. I've always known." Before Amora could respond, the air around them shimmered. The being, invisible to Kemi, had manifested a shield of light between them. Kemi stumbled backward, confused by the sudden resistance she couldn't see. "What was that?" she gasped. Amora forced a smile. "Just the wind. You should go, Kemi. It's not safe to be here." Kemi's expression hardened with rage and fear. She practically ran from the hut. And Amora knew her time was running out. The being insisted she retrieve something from deeper in the forest. "There is a relic," it explained, "hidden where the old trees grow thickest. A talisman that will protect us both when the truth emerges." Amora didn't want to go back into those dark woods, but she had no choice. She waited until noon, when most villagers napped, then slipped between the trees. The forest felt different now, aware of her, watching her with countless invisible eyes. She followed the being's telepathic guidance, moving deeper than she'd ever dared. The trees here were ancient, their trunks wider than houses. Moss covered everything like green fur. Then she saw it, a clearing she'd never noticed before, though she'd walked these paths her whole life. In the center lay a body. Her scream died in her throat. The corpse was arranged deliberately, arms spread wide, flowers placed in a circle around it. This wasn't random death, this was a warning. The body was fresh, maybe days old. She recognized the clothes, the traveling merchant who'd passed through last week. He'd been asking questions about old village legends. Someone had silenced him. On his chest lay a piece of bark carved with symbols. Amora couldn't read them, but she understood their message: stay silent, or join him. That night, the forest transformed into something from a dream. Thousands of fireflies emerged, their light far too bright, too coordinated to be natural. They swirled in patterns that seemed almost like words written in living light. Amora stood at the forest edge, mesmerized. The being appeared beside her, and for the first time, she saw its true form. Wings unfolded from its back, not feathered or leathery, but made of pure crystallized starlight. Each movement scattered prismatic colors across the trees. Its face shifted between masculine and feminine, young and old, human and utterly alien. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she'd ever witnessed. "This is what I truly am," the being said, voice echoing with harmonics that shouldn't exist. "I am mercy incarnate. I am the force that prevents cruelty from consuming everything. I am what your village traded away for gold and power." The fireflies danced faster, their light growing intense. Then, suddenly, they all went dark at once. Total blackness swallowed the forest. Amora heard footsteps approaching, multiple sets, moving with purpose. The being's wings folded, its light dimming to nothing. "They're coming," it whispered directly into her mind. "And they know exactly where we are." Something grabbed her arm in the darkness, and she barely suppressed a scream. Dawn found Amora at the village well, exhausted from a sleepless night. She'd escaped the hunters again, barely. As she lowered her bucket into the dark water below, something strange happened. The water began to glow faintly, and images formed on its surface like a mirror showing the past. She saw the same well, centuries ago. Villagers dragging someone, a woman who looked remarkably like Amora, toward the forest. The woman screamed and begged, but no one showed mercy. They accused her of weakness, of helping outsiders when the village needed strength. They called her a traitor for showing kindness to a dying stranger. The vision shifted. Amora saw elders gathered in secret, chanting over chains forged from melted down bells, church bells that had once called people to worship and community. She watched them bind the being to the tree, watched it struggle and plead. And she saw who led the ritual, a young man who looked exactly like Boba Ogun. The vision changed again, showing her own birth. Her mother dying in childbirth while elders stood watching, refusing help because her family was cursed. The same family that had protested the ritual 300 years ago. The well's surface rippled, showing one final image, a child, herself, marked with an invisible symbol on her forehead, chosen before she could even speak. No, Amara whispered. But the truth was undeniable. This had always been her destiny. A stranger appeared in the village square that afternoon, drawing immediate attention. Tall and wrapped in a cloak that seemed to absorb light, the traveler moved with unnatural grace. Amara watched from the shadows as the stranger's eyes swept across the crowd and locked onto her hiding spot instantly. A chill ran down her spine. The stranger approached slowly, and villagers parted like water before a boat. When they stood close enough to speak privately, the traveler's voice was ancient and tired. You've made a terrible mistake, child. What you freed cannot be controlled. It will bring ruin to everything you know. Amora's hands clenched into fists. It was imprisoned unjustly. It's a victim, not a monster. The stranger's laugh was bitter. Mercy is the most dangerous force in existence. It disrupts the natural order. The strong must dominate the weak, that's how the world survives. Your ancestors understood this. They built prosperity on that truth. Before Amora could argue, the stranger turned to leave. But something fell from their cloak, a piece of ancient cloth, torn and stained. Symbols covered it, the same symbols she'd seen carved on the merchant's body. She picked it up with trembling fingers, recognizing one mark, a tree with chains for roots. The stranger had already vanished into the crowd, leaving only questions and the horrible realization that this conflict was far older and larger than she'd imagined. 3 village hunters surrounded her hut that night, moving quietly but not quietly enough. Amora heard them whispering, planning how to search her home while she slept. The being stood invisible in the corner, radiating tension. Let me protect you, it urged in her mind. I can make them forget. I can make them leave. But Amora refused. Violence, even peaceful violence, would only confirm their suspicions. Instead, she threw open her door before they could break it down. Can I help you? She asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. The lead hunter, a scarred man named Deo, looked embarrassed at being caught. We are searching all homes near the forest. Looking for signs of unnatural influence. Amora stepped aside, gesturing to her pathetic dwelling. Search all you like. I have nothing to hide. They tore through her few possessions, a sleeping mat, one cooking pot, a handful of grain. They checked the walls, the floor, even the thatched roof. The being stood among them, completely invisible, occasionally moving objects they'd already searched just to confuse them. Finally, they left frustrated. But as Dale passed, he leaned close and whispered, people are talking about you, Amora. They remember your cursed family. Be very careful. In the village square, she heard her name mentioned in a gathering of elders. The word which floated on the evening air like poison. The forest called to her the next morning, pulling at her consciousness like a rope around her chest. The being urged her forward, its presence stronger than ever. As they walked, the trees began to move. Not swaying in wind, but deliberately shifting position, their massive roots pulling up and replanting themselves. A hidden path revealed itself, one that had been concealed for centuries. Ancient stones lined the way, carved with words in a language Amora couldn't read but somehow understood. Here lies the truth. Here lies the price. Here lies the beginning and the end. The path led to a shrine overgrown with vines and moss. As Amora pulled the vegetation away, her heart stopped. The shrine's stone surface bore many names, carved deep and filled with what looked like dried blood. At the top of the list was her family name, Olemide. Below it, generations of names she recognized from village stories, all the families that had suffered mysterious tragedies, all the people who died young or poor or forgotten. They marked everyone who showed kindness, the being explained quietly. Everyone who refused to embrace pure strength. Your family has been punished for 300 years, Amora. And you are the last of your line. She traced her finger over her grandmother's name, her mother's name, feeling the weight of inherited suffering. Then the being showed her something carved on the shrine's base, a prophecy stating that the last daughter of the merciful would either destroy the village or save it. The village turned on her openly after that. Mama Folek spat at her feet when she tried to buy grain. Merchant town refused to sell her anything. Children threw stones and shouted witch as she passed. The blacksmith's son organized a mob, their faces twisted with fear and hatred. Amora returned to her hut, barricading the door with her meager furniture. Through the walls, she heard the growing crowd outside, their voices rising in accusation and anger. She's cursed. She's brought demons among us. Burn her out. The being materialized fully, its form crackling with barely contained power. Say the word, it urged. I can stop them all. I can make them understand what they've done, what they've become. But Amora knew that would only prove them right. Violence would beget violence. The crowd outside grew larger, braver. Someone threw a torch at her roof. She watched in horror as flames began to catch on the dry thatch. Then Baba Ogan's voice cut through the chaos, commanding and cold. Enough. We will handle this properly. The council will meet tonight to decide her fate. The crowd reluctantly dispersed, but their hateful glares promised this wasn't over. The village council meant a trial, and everyone knew these trials had only one outcome. As darkness fell, Amora realized she had perhaps one night left to live. They came for her at midnight, not the council, but something worse. Dark shapes moved outside her window, whispering in voices that scratched at her sanity. The being pulled her close, and they fled into the forest as shadows pursued them like living smoke. Branches tore at Amora's skin as she ran. Behind her, the shadows hissed and howled, gaining ground. The being's light provided the only illumination, casting wild dancing patterns through the trees. They reached a stream, and Amora paused to catch her breath. That's when she saw her reflection in the moonlit water and screamed. Her face had changed. Her eyes held a faint golden glow, just like the being's. Her skin shimmered slightly, as if starlight lived just beneath the surface. Intricate patterns marked her arms, symbols she'd never seen before, glowing with soft white light. What did you do to me? She demanded, spinning to face the being. It looked genuinely surprised and concerned. Nothing intentionally. But our bond has grown strong. My essence is bleeding into yours. The being reached out tentatively. Amora, you're becoming a bridge between your world and mine. The mark of mercy is taking root in you. The shadows burst from the tree, and Amora realized with horror that they had her face, her form. They were copies created from the darkness in the village's collective hatred. And they wanted to consume what little light remained. The being offered her escape. We can leave this place. Travel far beyond the village's reach. You'll be safe, and I'll recover my strength. Amora looked back toward the village, seeing smoke from cooking fires rising into the dawn sky. Despite everything, the hatred, the stones, the accusations, this was her home. These were her people, poisoned by an ancient curse but still human beneath it all. No, she said firmly. Running won't solve anything. The curse will continue. The village will keep suffering. Someone has to break the cycle, and maybe that's why I was chosen. The being's expression shifted through surprise, admiration, and deep sadness. You realize what staying means. They will try to kill you. The council will demand your death to maintain their prosperity. Amora nodded, feeling strangely calm. My whole life, I've been invisible. Maybe that was preparation for this moment. Maybe the overlooked are the only ones who can see what really matters. The being studied her for a long moment, then said something that made her blood freeze. If you stay, the truth will emerge. And when it does, reality itself will crack open. The village will face everything they've hidden from for 300 years. It leaned closer, golden eyes intense. Are you prepared for that? Because the revelation won't be gentle. It will be devastating. Amora thought of all the names carved on that shrine. All the suffering her family had endured. Then let it come, she whispered. Let the truth burn everything down. The village descended into chaos over the following days. Animals fled the farmlands in droves, chickens, goats, even the oxen broke their pens and ran into the wilderness. Crops that had been thriving withered overnight, leaves turning black as if touched by frost despite the summer heat. Strange storms appeared from clear skies, lightning striking without thunder, rain falling upward instead of down. Elders called emergency meetings, sacrificing goats and chickens to appease angry spirits. Baba Ogan led prayers in the village square, his voice strong but his hands trembling. Amora watched from her hiding spot in the forest, the being beside her. Something felt wrong about these disasters, too coordinated, too theatrical. Then she saw it, the blacksmith's son sneaking dead chickens into a neighbor's coop, spreading rumors that they'd died of curse. Merchant turned watering his own crops with poison, then blaming supernatural forces. Kemi setting small fires and claiming evil spirits were responsible. They are manufacturing the curse, Amora realized with horror. They are creating fear deliberately. The being nodded grimly. Fear makes people controllable. Someone is orchestrating this panic, using it to consolidate power. But who? And why? As if answering her thoughts, Baba Ogan's voice rose above the crowd. Only through unity and strength can we survive. Only by eliminating the weak and curse can we prosper. The crowd roared approval, and Amora finally understood. The curse was never about the past. It was about maintaining control in the present. The mysterious traveler returned, appearing in the forest where Amora hid. This time, their cloak fell away, revealing a woman whose age was impossible to determine. She could have been 30 or 3,000 years old. I am Ife, the traveler announced, guardian of the sacred balance. I've watched this land for longer than your village has existed. She fixed both Amora and the being with intense eyes. What you freed, child, is Anu, the living embodiment of mercy. 3 centuries ago, your ancestors made a devastating choice. They believed mercy made them weak, so they imprisoned it physically. Ife gestured to Anu, who stood silent and luminous. Without mercy tempering their ambitions, the village prospered materially but rotted spiritually. Generation after generation grew more cruel, more selfish. The cause isn't supernatural, it's psychological. It's the natural consequence of living without compassion. Amora's mind reeled. But why me? Why now? Ife's expression softened. Because you are the last daughter of the family that refused to participate in the ritual. Your bloodline maintained mercy even when it meant suffering. That's why you could see Anu when others couldn't. That's why you had the courage to free them. The guardian's face grew grave. But understand this, Anu is not just a prisoner you freed. They are the last key holding this entire region together. Without them imprisoned, but also without them fully restored, the land itself will begin to collapse. You have perhaps 3 days before everything dies: the forest, the village, the earth itself. Kemi appeared at the forest edge, tears streaming down her face. Amora tensed, expecting betrayal, but her former friend collapsed to her knees. "I'm sorry," Kemi sobbed. "I'm so sorry. They promised me things, money, status, a place on the council, if I help turn the village against you. I've been spying, reporting everything you do." Amora wanted to feel anger, but found only sadness. "Why, Kemi? We were friends once." "Because I was jealous." Kemi's voice cracked with emotion. "You have nothing, no money, no status, no family, but you're still kind. You still hope. I have everything I wanted, but I'm hollow inside. I've become exactly what they want: cruel, suspicious, ambitious. And I hate myself for it." The confession hung in the air between them. Then something extraordinary happened. The forest itself responded. Trees groaned and shifted. The ground trembled. Animals that had fled began returning, circling the 3 of them: Amora, Kemi, and the glowing Anu. A sound rose from the earth, not quite voice but carrying meaning. The forest was acknowledging the confession, recognizing genuine remorse. Anu stepped forward, reaching toward Kemi with one luminous hand. "Mercy isn't just forgiveness," they said softly. "It's the courage to change." When they touched Kemi's forehead, she gasped. The hatred and jealousy that had consumed her for years seemed to lift like smoke. And in that moment, Amora understood, this was how they'd break the curse. Anu's transformation began at sunset. The partial, flickering form they'd maintained since being freed finally solidified into something magnificent and terrible. They stood at least 7 feet tall, their body composed of living light that shifted between solid and ethereal. The wings of starlight spread wider, each feather a crystallized moment of kindness from throughout history. Their face became clearer, neither male nor female but containing all genders, all ages, all expressions of compassion that had ever existed. Patterns of light danced across their skin, showing scenes: a mother feeding a hungry child, strangers helping each other during disasters, friends offering comfort in grief, enemies choosing forgiveness over revenge. Each image glowed bright then faded, replaced by another, an endless cycle of mercy in action. "This is what your ancestors feared," Anu explained, voice resonating with harmonics that made Amora's bones vibrate. "They saw mercy as weakness, but look closely." The images shifted, showing that every act of kindness created ripples, saved lives that went on to save others, prevented conflicts that would have destroyed communities, built connections that held societies together. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the foundation of all lasting strength. Then Anu's expression darkened, and they pointed toward the village. "But something else has taken root here. Something that has been hiding in plain sight, growing strong on your people's cruelty. It wears a familiar face, and it will fight to maintain its power." The land began tearing itself apart. Cracks appeared in the village square, spreading like lightning through stone and soil. Houses tilted on suddenly unstable foundations. The sky darkened to a sickly green, clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. Villagers screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to go. The forest itself seemed to be pulling away from the village, trees uprooting and moving, creating an expanding gap of dead earth between civilization and nature. Anu stood at the boundary, arms spread wide, trying to hold both sides together through sheer will. Light poured from their body, filling the cracks, but it wasn't enough. "The balance is breaking," they gasped, strain evident in their voice. For 300 years, the land has been held together by stolen mercy and deliberate cruelty. Now that I'm free but not yet restored, the foundation is collapsing. Amora felt it too, a wrongness in the air, like the world itself was coming unstitched. She understood now, Anu couldn't simply return to power. They needed something specific, something that had been taken. Guardian Ife appeared beside them, her ancient face grave. The village must make a choice, and they must make it together. Continue on their current path and watch everything die, or embrace what they imprisoned. Anu turned to Amora, golden eyes filled with urgency and fear. If you falter now, if you cannot convince them to choose mercy over strength, everything dies. The village, the forest, the land for 100 miles in every direction. Everything. The truth struck Amara like lightning as she stood in her family's old shrine. Carved at the very bottom, hidden under centuries of dirt and moss, was the complete prophecy: when mercy breaks its chains, the invisible daughter will choose to inherit her ancestors' curse or break it entirely. She who was marked before birth, she who carries both bloodlines, she who sees what others cannot, she will stand between destruction and salvation. But know this, she is not just witness. She is key. She is sacrifice. She is guardian. She was never meant to free mercy. She was meant to become it. Amora's hands trembled as she traced the ancient words. Become it. Not just help Anu, but merge with them, become the new embodiment of mercy for this land. That was why she'd been marked as a baby. Why she'd been born into the cursed bloodline. Why she could see and hear what others couldn't. She was descended from the original guardians, the people who had protected mercy before the ritual. But she was also descended, through her father's hidden lineage, from the very elders who had performed the imprisonment. She carried both bloodlines, the cursed and the curses. She was the bridge between both worlds. Anu appeared behind her, their light dimmed with sadness. I couldn't tell you before. You had to choose freely, without knowing the cost. They paused. The enemy isn't outside the village, Amora. It's inside the most trusted leader. Baba Ogun isn't just old. He's ancient. He performed the original ritual, and he's been sustained by what he imprisoned. He's fed on stolen mercy for 3 centuries. The confrontation happened at the forest edge, where dying land met living trees. The entire village gathered, forced out by the collapsing ground beneath their homes. Baba Ogun stood before them, his kindly facade finally cracking. You want to know the truth? He snarled, and his voice was no longer that of a gentle elder. It echoed with centuries of accumulated cruelty. I made this village strong. I freed us from the weakness of compassion. Before the ritual, we were just another struggling community. After, we thrived. His body began to change, growing larger, darker. The mask of humanity fell away, revealing something that had been pretending to be human for 300 years. A spirit of pure consumption, feeding on the village's gradually increasing cruelty, growing fat on their abandoned mercy. And you, he pointed at Amora, you're trying to destroy everything I built. You want to make them weak again. Anu stepped forward, wings spread wide, light blazing. You've twisted the natural order. Made them believe strength comes from cruelty when true strength comes from unity. From caring for the vulnerable. From choosing kindness when it's difficult. The corrupted spirit that wore Baba Ogun's face laughed. And who will believe that? These people have tasted power without conscience. They won't go back. Then it turned to Amora with a horrible smile. Besides, the girl carries my bloodline too. My darkness runs in her veins. She could become the next me, the next keeper of beneficial cruelty. Why resist? Amora stood between the corrupted spirit and Anu, feeling both forces pulling at her soul. The spirit was right, she carried that dark lineage, that capacity for cruelty. She'd felt it sometimes when villagers mocked her, that hot desire for revenge. But she also carried the other bloodline, the one that chose mercy even when it meant suffering. The village watched in terrified silence as she made her choice. Not with words, but with action. She reached out and took Anu's glowing hand in her left, and reached toward the corrupted spirit with her right. Both forces flooded into her, the radiant power of mercy and the dark hunger of cruelty. She should have been torn apart by the opposing energies, but instead, something extraordinary happened. She understood both. Accepted both as part of the human experience. Mercy didn't mean ignoring cruelty, it meant choosing not to be controlled by it. Strength didn't mean abandoning compassion, it meant having the courage to be kind despite risk. The integration was agonizing and ecstatic, destructive and creative. Light burst from Amora's body, flowing into the land, healing the cracks, restoring the balance. The corrupted spirit screamed as it was pulled out of Baba Ogan's body, purified, and absorbed into the new equilibrium. The real Baba Ogan collapsed, suddenly ancient, suddenly mortal. The curse lifted from the village like fog burning off in sunlight. People blinked as if waking from a long nightmare, seeing clearly for the first time in generations. The forest stopped retreating. Animals returned. Crops began to heal. Amora stood transformed, no longer invisible, no longer poor, no longer human in the old sense. She had become the new guardian of mercy, the living bridge between strength and compassion. The village would have to rebuild not just their homes but their hearts. It would be difficult. Many would resist. But for the first time in 3 centuries, it was possible. Guardian Ife smiled and nodded, her duty complete. Anu's essence lived on in Amora, merged but not lost. And the village finally saw her, not as the invisible one, but as the woman who had saved them all by refusing to let cruelty have the final word. The story spread beyond the village, carried by travelers who witnessed the transformation. They spoke of the poor woman who saved something precious in the forest. They spoke of mercy reborn. They spoke of kindness chosen in darkness becoming the light that shaped destiny. If only they truly knew who she had saved and who she had become.